Hello. Hi, everyone. Just going to keep saying hello while everyone joins. Thanks for joining. Just give everyone a few minutes to log in. Happy Friday. Give everyone a couple of minutes. Hello, hello. Hi. Very weird. Me and Natalie were just saying it's going to be very strange. None of you can talk back to us. So I'm just saying hello to a screen. I'm looking at an attendee list. So hello. Hello, attendees. Thank you for joining. Just giving everyone a couple of minutes to get logged in and set up. Let's start. Okay, I'll dive right in. So, hello and happy Friday. Thank you for joining our free webinar this afternoon. I will just start by giving you a very quick tour of Zoom webinars if you have never joined a Zoom webinar before. But at the bottom of your screen, you should have a little Q&A function. So if you have any questions throughout the hour that we are together, please just pop them in this box. And if you like one of the questions that someone else is asking, if you could just give it a thumbs up so we know we can definitely cover that question for you at the end. And it looks like today the chat function's working. If you joined my webinar last week with Annika Wainwright, you will know that I could not get the chat function working. That was very embarrassing. But you live and learn, and it is working today. So can you all just, if you don't mind, saying hello in the chat box, or give us a wave and say maybe your name and where you're joining us from today. Hi Gemma, hi Kath, hi Seth, hi Nyasha, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hi Deb. Nice to see you all, thanks for joining. So time for a couple of intros. Hi Jenna from South Wales. Yeah, it's a bit grey in Bristol today and I'm going camping this weekend, so wish me luck. These webinars and how they came to be, I'm Glenda, I'm a freelance marketing consultant, and I have only been doing it for about 6 months, 7 months now. And when I was sort of researching setting up on my own or getting started, I found it quite daunting, the amount of information online, particularly LinkedIn. There were lots of freelancers on LinkedIn complaining about not getting paid and all of the kind of stresses and worries about freelancing. And I just felt like it was quite a negative space. And then on the flip side, I had lots of entrepreneurs and business owners who were kind of telling me that how they made £4,000 billion overnight with their really easy 5-step tricks and tips. And I just felt like that was just unrealistic and not really somewhere that I wanted to be. So when I eventually decided to take the plunge or started researching a bit more within my means, I came across some amazing, amazing women who'd founded their own businesses or were working for themselves. And I just thought, why aren't these women like sharing their stories, and why aren't they telling everyone about the amazing stuff that they're doing and sharing their knowledge with other people? And so that's what this is about, is giving some of these amazing women a platform to share their own stories and their knowledge with other people who are thinking of potentially doing the same. So if you're employed at the moment, maybe thinking about going it alone or starting your own business, doesn't have to be now, but maybe somewhere in the future, then I hope you'll find these webinars useful. Today, my wonderful guest is Natalie Binstead-Wey, who runs BW Business Accountants and Advisors. Yes, right. No tongue ties today. And I first met Natalie when I was just in the depths of trying to figure out how freelancing would work for me financially. I still needed to pay my mortgage, I still needed to pay for childcare, and I was just thinking, how am I going to do that? I think it's very easy to get used to a nice regular salary coming in, and I wanted to make sure that I could still afford the lifestyle that I have. But it just felt impossible, and everything I was looking at, it was just all getting on top of me, and I do have that part of my brain missing, that financial bit. Enter Natalie. I booked a power hour with her, and I started crying, Natalie, didn't I, at the end of
You
the
did, yes.
Natalie just made everything just feel really possible. All of a sudden, everything just clicked into place, and it was like the missing puzzle piece for me. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I meet Natalie sooner? I could have done this sooner. But I will hand over to Natalie to introduce herself. Thank you for joining us, Natalie.
Thank you very much for having me. And I promise I wasn't being horrible. I didn't make Glenda cry. I think it was just the realization that actually this is possible. Yeah, it's great to be here. So I'm a chartered accountant and chartered tax advisor, set up my own accountancy business about 2.5 years ago. And I've been working with lots of wonderful business owners since then, helping them with all things accounting and tax related.
Amazing. Tell us a bit about the business, Natalie, how it started, how it came to be, how you went about knowing this is what you wanted to do.
I've always wanted to have my own business. So I did business studies, GCSE and A-level. So I've always had kind of a bit of a business interest, entrepreneurial. I think my mum always used to say that I could sell ice to Eskimos, which I'm guessing is a compliment. I think I'm not even sure you're supposed to use that word now, so I do apologize if you're not. But yeah, so it's something I've always wanted to do, and I didn't really know what my business would be. I guess I thought I would suddenly at some point have this miraculous idea and this was going to be my business. That hasn't really happened. I'm not a particularly creative person, so it was never going to be anything like that. I qualified as an accountant and thought, you know, this will do. Worked for quite a lot of the sort of big firms in and around Bristol, worked for some of the big four, had lots of experience, and then COVID lockdowns happened. Kind of gave me a chance to get off the hamster wheel a little bit, which was quite nice, because I was always just working really, really hard that I never had time to really think about anything. We were then at home, had lots of time to think, and decided actually, yeah, I'd really like to kind of start my own business. Got a bit fed up with corporate life. I realized that I am not a very good employee in that I do the job, but I'm just not very good at doing what I'm told, and I always try and think of better ways to do things. And actually now I have employees, I'd really encourage them to do that, but a lot of the corporate businesses don't really like that. It's this is the way we do it, this is the way we've always done it, it's never going to change. But I saw kind of during the lockdowns how some of these big corporate businesses were not set up for working from home or flexible working or any of that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed working from home. I enjoyed having flexibility over my day. So it kind of suddenly came to be.
Amazing. I think lockdown did that for a lot of people, didn't it? Just that opportunity to have time and space away from, as you said, like the hamster wheel of daily life, and you just don't get time to think. You're just very functional. Certainly I am during the week. So yeah, lockdown gave everyone an opportunity to reassess, I think, what they really wanted from working life. Amazing. So were there any particular challenges that you felt that you faced when you were setting up? And yeah, tell us about those. How did that go?
I think the main one, and I think everybody feels like this, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, despite having, you know, business studies, A-level, being a qualified accountant, that's very theoretical, very, very different to actually setting up a business. So that was a bit scary. Also, you know, starting from scratch. You know, you're going from an accountancy firm where you're just being spoon-fed clients all the time. You have your own, you know, portfolio, whereas I was literally starting from essentially nothing, which was a bit scary and a bit like I still had a mortgage to pay, still, needed to contribute, needed to eat. So that was a bit scary and overwhelming as well. Sometimes it's just difficult to know where to start.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah, 100%. Because it feels like there's a really big list. I don't know who's in charge of this list, but yeah, for me, it just felt like I need to do all of the things, but couldn't figure out what the things were.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is we probably had very different lists. Like for you, the things that you perhaps didn't know where to start or what to do were in terms of finances and how to, be self-employed. I kind of knew that was okay. But for me, marketing was the thing I really struggled with because it's not something that I know how to do necessarily. I'm not a particularly creative person. Didn't really know where to start. So that was the bit I really struggled with the most.
Yeah, yeah, so interesting, isn't it? How people are just drawn to different things. Amazing. What do you love about running your own business? I think,
Lots of things.
yeah.
I could never go back to being an employee now. I don't think. I just don't think. I think I would hate it. I think the things I love the most are having flexibility over my own diary and time. Particularly, so I was a manager in an accountancy firm, so you're getting squeezed from everywhere. You've got junior staff below you wanting all of your time and attention. You've got the partners who are winning the work, wanting you to do work like that, and then you've got clients wanting you as well. So you're getting pulled in lots of different directions. The great thing I have now, I still get pulled in lots of different directions, but it's under my control. So that's a lot better. I think I love networking and meeting new people. I love, like yesterday, I treated myself to an afternoon off and I went and got a massage. I never would have been able to do that if I was employed. Not that I do that all the time, but it's just nice to have the option to do that. I love working from home. I love being able to drive the strategy of the business and grow it at the pace that I want to grow it. I'm just basically a massive control freak and love having control over everything.
That's exactly how I feel. Now I'm like, I'm in charge. Yeah, I totally agree with all of the things that you said. The one I think for me is not getting caught up in like internal politics of
Yeah,
like working
I don't miss that.
business and
Yeah.
getting drawn into, oh, we can't do that, we can't sign that off because of X, Y, and Z. It's like if I want to do something, I'm just going to do it and it feels right, and you learn, as you go.
Yeah, and if you do make a mistake or something doesn't work out, like that's okay. You will learn from it. You're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. There's been a few mistakes I've made, or I'm like, won't do that again,
Yeah.
but it's not the end of the world, and it's only you that you're accountable for. Even with employees, the buck still stops with me, doesn't it? It's only going to be me that's annoyed if something doesn't work out the way that I want it to.
I haven't got a disappointed boss sitting on
No, being like, I told you.
amazing. So some financy questions as
Hmm.
what is the most common question that you get asked from someone who's setting up on their own sole trader or limited company?
There's probably a few. One is, should I be a sole trader or a limited company? Get asked that an awful lot, and there's not a wrong or right answer to that question either, because it will depend on personal circumstances, the type of the business, whether you're looking to take on employees, how quickly you're looking to grow, all of that kind of thing. So I do get asked that one a lot. How much should I charge? Which is obviously something that we talked about, because again, if you're going from an employed job, even for me as an employee, as an accountancy practice, I still had to provide quotes and stuff to clients, but it's very different. It's a
Yeah.
really different thing. It's a quote based on our charge out rates and how long it's going to take us. Whereas when you're a business owner, you've got to make sure you're covering all of the costs, that you've got enough money to eat at the end of the month and pay your bills and that kind of thing. So that's a question I get asked a lot. And again, there's not one size fits all answer to that, because somebody who has a bigger mortgage and doesn't have children might have different requirements to somebody who has children, or perhaps has a spouse or a partner who is a high earner or something like that, so that the answer will be different. Also depends on the type of clients that you're working with, what they're kind of likely to want to spend, what the market rate might be, that kind of thing. And then in terms of sort of core accounting stuff is like, what records do I need to keep, and
Yeah.
what expenses can I claim?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you get it where, oh, I've had a letter from HMRC, what do I need to do? Is also
Yeah.
another question.
Oh my God, these letters from HMRC, I just find them so confusing. I just don't know why they can't get a copywriter in or something and just make them sound, I don't
It's
know.
all templates that are probably like 25 years old. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, it feels 25 years old. And it's the lingo, and if you're not financially inclined, if that's even a phrase, it's just so impossible to get your head around.
I agree. And I know what they're talking about half the time, and I still have to read it like 4 times to understand it.
It's interesting what you say about knowing what to charge, because the bit for me that I think really clicked when we first met in that power hour was that you've done that totally bespoke salary calculator for me, and you asked me a load of questions about my outgoings, what salary I'm used to kind of taking home, and just like turning the laptop around and showing me and going, oh look, yeah, this is what, and I was like,
I think it's really different because obviously you get so used to, like you said at the beginning, as an employee, you get paid every month, your tax deductions get taken from your salary, you just get, they get paid over to HMRC for you. You don't have to think of any of that. But when you're pricing as a sole trader or even as a limited company, you have to almost work backwards, because you have to factor in that tax, you have to factor in staff costs, running costs of the business. If you've got an office, that costs an awful lot of money. So you have to work backwards, work out what all your costs are, to then work out what you're going to charge. It's a whole different mindset.
yeah, yeah. Oh, just gave me goosebumps. Costs and stuff. So give us your top tips then, Natalie. What are your top 3 tips that you would give to a startup or a sole trader that are just getting on the ladder?
Yeah, okay. So I would really, first of all, recommend you use some accounting software, not just a spreadsheet. There's nothing to stop you using a spreadsheet. All I would say is accounting software will make your life easier. Particularly if you're not great at spreadsheets. It's just so much easier. There's also, and you may have heard of this, Making Tax Digital coming in for sole traders 2026, and that is basically going to require everybody to use accounting software. So if you start using it when you first set up, it's just going to make so much easier for you when you come to do your tax return. Linked with that is to have a separate bank account. It doesn't have to be a business bank account if you're a sole trader. It does if you're a limited company, but it could just be, if you've got a spare bank account, if you've just got an old personal account that you're not using, just use that, put all your business expenses and everything through that. It's just going to make it so much easier for you to track. I have a couple of clients that have one bank account for absolutely everything, and I can tell you it is just painful going through it, being like, what's this, was this business, was this personal? Just keep it separate. It's so much easier. And if you're using software, you can usually connect that bank account to the software, so it takes another step away, that essentially you'll get like a real-time bank statement coming through, which will make it a lot easier. And then when you set up that bank account, and a lot of the challenger banks allow you to do this, is to have a separate pot or space within that bank account to start putting money in for your tax, because it's really easy to just get paid by all these customers and be like, oh, this is great, I've got loads of money, and then 12 months later you get hit by a massive tax bill from HMRC and you go, oh, I haven't got any money to pay that. Whereas if you get in the habit of putting 30% of what you're getting paid aside into a separate pot, it will alleviate that pain. It's a good habit to get into. And if you're VAT registered as well, just putting, another 20% aside for that. A lot of especially the challenger banks, so Starling Bank, for example, now allow you to, there's like rules you can set up that's say like, oh, every time I get money come in, put 20% of that into the pot. And that just means you don't even have to think about it then.
Yeah, exactly. And I've done all of this because I had a power hour. And now I have a little tax pot. It's really sad though to look in that pot sometimes. I'm like, can I put all that money just?
I know.
Okay.
But it's probably no more than you would have paid when you were employed. It's just you wouldn't have seen it when you were employed.
Exactly. It's all psychological.
Yes. Yep. And then the other thing is, don't touch that pot once you've set it up. Don't spend that money.
So tempting to just be like, as you say, go and get a massage on my lunch break with my tax money.
Yeah.
What accounting software would you recommend as a little sub question you mentioned?
So we use Xero. So that's the one that we always recommend to clients, just because I think it is the best of breed software. It is a bit more expensive. So if you're just starting out, and I know Glenda, you did this, if you open a metal bank account, which is part of NatWest, I think, you get free access to Free Agent, which is a great software for freelancers. So that's really good, like when you're just starting out. There's a couple of other apps out there. We've also done some work with Coconut, which is another app, particularly for sole traders. So Xero, I think, is like the best of breed. And if you're working with an accountant, they'll probably get you to try and use something like that. But if you're just starting out and wanting to just get going on your own and not use a spreadsheet, I would say Coconut or Free Agent would be a good place to start.
Coconut sounds like they're trying to make finance fun.
Yeah, they've got a really good marketing team.
I can imagine. Amazing. So the next question is, what are your best practices for keeping on top of finances? And if I can give you an example of my own, is that I occasionally forget that I've got a separate bank account, would you believe? But so for networking events, for example, if I want to buy a ticket, I'm so used to just, or I've got my own sort of personal bank account card saved on my computer. So I tend to just pay for everything with that. And then I go, oh, I should have paid for that through my business bank account. Yeah, I guess, would you, yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, add your business card to your Google Wallet or whatever it is you're using on your computer. I also have mine on my Apple Pay. So if I'm out and about, it's, you know, it's just on there and I don't have to think about it. I'm too poor to put stuff on my personal card, so it goes through the business card anyway. What else would I say is digitizing your receipts. So even if you do accidentally pay for it personally, just make sure you're keeping a receipt. If you're using software, quite often they'll allow you to attach the receipt to the transaction within the software, and then you don't have to worry about keeping paper receipts. So that will make things a lot easier. Keep on top of it regularly, I would say. So set some time aside. So maybe you say, I don't know, Friday morning, you probably don't need a whole morning, but it's, you know, my finance and admin time, because 6 months down the line, you're not going to remember that you bought a load of stuff on your personal card. And then it makes it a lot harder, or you probably just won't include it on your tax return and you'll end up paying more tax than you have to. So keep on top of it regularly. Don't leave things until the last minute, because you'll just get stressed. So try and do things, don't bury your head in the sand. Just try and eat the frog. I think that's the expression, is it? Do the thing that you really don't want to do and it actually won't be as bad as you think it's going to be. Yeah, and just don't ignore HMRC. They won't go away.
Yeah. I feel like I'm making a list of all the things that I do, Natalie. Yeah, it's really hard. It's not, obviously not part of the job that I enjoy, so it's difficult to be like put in good practices, I guess.
Yeah, I think you do have to be quite disciplined, and I think it's really easy for me, you know, I'm a very organized person, I'm very finance minded, so for me it just seems really simple to do all of this stuff, but obviously if you're not, I can understand that that does feel a bit overwhelming. But if you have someone who can support you, it doesn't necessarily have to be an accountant, you know, perhaps looking at getting a virtual assistant or something like that that can just help you with some of the admin stuff. I know that's another cost, but might just help to kind of give you a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, this is more of a female founder question for you. If you could give another woman 3 pieces of advice before starting their own business, what would those be?
So I think as women, we're really bad at, well, most of us have imposter syndrome. We're really bad at believing in ourselves and believing that we can do things. So I think my advice would be around those 3 points. So find your tribe, essentially. They don't have to be women, you know, it could be anyone, but find the people who support you, who inspire you, and that you want to be around. and just hold on to them. Don't let them go. You know, I do a lot of networking with other accountants, which sounds a bit crazy, but at the same time, you can learn so much from those people who've kind of been there and done it. Have the support network. I think traditionally women probably do more around childcare and around the home and things like that. So don't let that overwhelm you and stop you from doing the things that you want to do in your business. You know, you can outsource cleaning. You don't have to do cleaning yourself. Like, that's okay. And telling yourself that that's okay. I think linked with that is getting a coach or a mentor who can kind of guide you with your business, or even, and I'm going to plug here, get, you know, even a good accountant who can just help you with the finance stuff. And they're quite often, they know about, you know, business and strategy and things like that. But obviously there are business coaches out there and mindset coaches and people like that who can really kind of help you to focus and drive your business, because it's really hard if you're getting pulled in lots of different directions to just sit down and focus on your business.
Yeah.
And set some time aside in your week as a working on the business time. That's not doing client work. It's not just an afternoon off or anything like that. It's today I'm looking at strategy. I'm looking at how I'm going to grow this business. And then kind of linked to that is just network. I get 95% of my leads from networking and word of mouth. So just get out there, speak to people, find, again, a bit like the find your tribe, find what works for you in networking. I'm probably an extrovert, so I like talking to people and I feel very comfortable going out and doing networking. But if you're more introverted, there are other groups that might suit you better than maybe what I might go to. So just try things, see how you get on, meet people. Even if you think, oh, I'm not sure they're a good fit for me, they might know somebody who is. So don't just write people off because you think, oh no, they're not a potential client, but they might know loads of people. So I think just getting out there is a good thing.
Advice. It's interesting because I would consider myself more of an introvert, even though I've decided to do a series of live webinars. And I find online communities a little bit more useful to me because I can almost be a bit faceless and hide behind the keyboard.
Which is interesting because I hate all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, so I've tried online networking. I just don't love it. It's fine if you're getting information, like for me. So if it's you know, like coming to something like this, for example, but if it's kind of having to build a connection with somebody, I find that very hard online. But that's just personal preference. So yeah, like there's so many great online communities out there. So if that's your preference, just go and join all of them and, you know, get to know people there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with online communities, for me anyway, it just gives me a little bit more headspace to think about how I might respond to something. Whereas obviously in person networking, it's very just, you can't be like, I'll come back to you on that.
I'm very good at waffling, so.
You're not waffling now, Natalie. You're not waffling. Amazing. And do you have any sources of inspiration, or do you read books? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you go on like regular training? Where do you get your motivation from, I suppose? Keep going.
I'm quite a driven person, so I'm quite good at motivating myself. But to kind of help me with that, I do read a lot of business books. My husband, who Glenda also knows, he doesn't read, he only ever reads non-fiction books. So I just read everything that he has, which is quite good. And he also has a subscription to loads of magazines, so I just read loads of those. In terms of podcasts, I love listening to Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. They have some amazing guests on there, and also the High Performance podcast, which is also really good. There's also a couple of podcasts that are specifically for the accounting space that I listen to. So Zero do a great podcast, but they get other accounting business owners on there talking about kind of what works for their practice and things like that, which I find really useful. So some industry specific stuff is great. Just other female business owners and particularly female accounting business owners, because again, they've kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt, you know, so I can learn an awful lot from them. Some of the networking I do is women only, so that's really nice to kind of be in a supportive environment like that. And then I really love going to like what I would call trade shows and conferences. So again, specifically for the accounting industry, I love going to those. I get so much inspiration. I come home and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But it's a mixture of, they have all the sort of accountancy software providers are there. So you can go and speak to them and you can, you know, go find out what they're working on. But also they run talks. So again, quite often other accounting business owners who will talk about their experiences. There's usually a couple on marketing, which are great because obviously I'm not a marketing specialist, so it's quite good to go and hear about those. They usually do a load of stuff on how to build a team, which is really interesting. And I always come away just feeling really pumped when I go to stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, I go to just one networking event in person at the moment, which I find really helpful because it feels like a kind of no judgment sort of space. And one of the things I was really paranoid about when I started working for myself was that I wouldn't get the chance to keep learning. So I feel like when you're in employment, they obviously offer you training opportunities,
Yes.
courses, and they'll pay for a lot of that stuff usually. So I was worried that going self-employed, I wouldn't get those same opportunities and that like my skills would dry up or I wouldn't go on these training things. But actually some of these networking things are really useful. They usually have someone there speaking or
Yes. And it's stuff that you maybe wouldn't have even gone to if you're an employee. I think that's where it's great where they're a networking group for business owners rather than just any old networking group. Yeah, which is great. I think I'm also quite lucky in that there actually aren't that many female accountants out there who have their own practice. There are some, but you know, the traditional view of an accountant is not someone who looks like me. So that helps. You know, you go along to a female only group and they're like, oh my God, a female accountant. This is amazing.
oh, that's nice. Can I ask you about that? So this is probably a really weird way to put it, but I think there is definitely people have preconceived ideas of an accountant.
Yeah.
People, and so myself included, I think people can think of it as quite a boring and stuffy kind of thing to do. No offense, Natalie. That's certainly like how accountancy comes across, and a bit of like a head scratching type of subject. And how would you kind of respond to that, I guess? And
Yeah, I think I hate it when you tell someone you're an accountant and they just go, oh. And then it's just like awkward silence. Because then they don't know what to say because they've obviously got that preconceived idea of it's boring, you know. There are some boring parts of accountancy, I'm not gonna lie, and those are the bits I generally try and steer away from. But I love tax. I think it's really exciting. I think it's something that impacts everybody's lives. It changes so often. There's so much that if you've got a good accountant who can do some good tax planning with you, there's so much you can save. And I'm not talking about anything dodgy here. I'm just talking about, you know, just planning your affairs and just making sure it's streamlined. I absolutely love working with business owners where I can see the difference that I've made to their business. Like that is just the most rewarding thing ever. But I think you do find generally accountants are not entrepreneurs. So you don't get that many where they go and start up on their own.
yeah.
But then when I go to these trade shows and I meet all of these other business owners, I'm like, yeah, there's a whole like world out there of cool, forward-thinking, tech-using accountants. It's just they're not the ones that people necessarily use, I think, maybe, or not the ones that they come across regularly. But I think it's really cool.
I've learned so much from you since we've known each other. And I guess it's similar to what you were saying earlier about HMRC and the letters being like 25 years old. It feels like there's a part of like accountancy and finance that might still be stuck in some of those oldie worldy.
I would agree. You know, having come from some of the big firms, you know, most of the partners there are men, for example. And, you know, we still have that problem in 2023. And I think a lot of women, again, particularly when they have a family, just think, oh, I'm not going to bother with that. And that doesn't help. I think the fact that HMRC is so backwards doesn't help, because we are having to deal with them, and you're having to correspond by letter. Like, that's just ridiculous. They closed their self-assessment helpline over the summer, so now you can't get through to speak to them. They're closing helplines left, right, and centre, so that's really, really not helping. The tax legislation, some of it dates back to 1890. That's nuts.
That is so crazy. I didn't know.
Yeah, so some of the stamp duty legislation dates back that far. The VAT Act dates back to 1994. That's nearly 30 years old. And basically what needs to happen is they need to rip everything up and rewrite it, but they don't. They just keep tweaking it and just adding bits in, which just makes it so complicated that it's a very difficult task to try and navigate it. I think a lot of the bigger firms are trying to be more forward thinking, but they're just being held back by the corporate structure, and this is the way we've always done things kind of brigade.
Yes, that little chestnut. Yeah, amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much. I do have a few questions over here, actually, in the Q&A.
Excellent.
Oh, the first one's in the chat from Gemma, and she says, please can you send us a link to your website, Natalie?
Oh, I will put that in the chat now. Yeah.
Lovely. The first question is from Deb Murray. Have you experienced the feast and famine cycle when you've been super busy, then scarily quiet in terms of work coming in? And if so, how did you cope with the famine? That's the thing that scares me the most when I think about setting up on my own.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I was very, very lucky in that when I first launched, I kind of had clients coming in straight away. And some of that was referrals from the firm that I was working for before. Some of it was from my network, which was really great. I did also have a part-time job when I first started my practice, which just made things a little bit less scary for me. As accountants, we're generally quite risk averse, so that really kind of helped with the cushion. But whenever I have had the times where it's been a bit quieter, I've seen that as a opportunity, I guess, to get out there, to be talking to people, doing more marketing, putting the systems and the structures in place as well, because it's very easy when you're getting overwhelmed with client work to not think about that kind of stuff. I think my other thing with networking in particular is to be consistent about it. Don't just think, oh, I'm busy, I'm not going to do it, and then you get to the point where you have no work, because it takes time. It takes probably, I was a member of my networking group probably for 6 months before I started getting any referrals from it. So if you're not consistent with it, that's when you will get the really lumpy sales coming through. I guess I'm quite lucky in that the way accountancy works, it's quite cyclical. So we have times of the year where we're busy because there's an HMRC deadline, and then we'll have times where it's quieter, and we're quite grateful for that because it allows us to catch up on everything else that we haven't done.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. When I do have quieter times, it's actually usually quite welcome.
Yes.
Finances, actually, and finding the receipts from January and things like that. But exactly what Natalie says, it gives me that chance to work on passion projects like this webinar, and yeah, getting out and meeting more people and booking coffees in with people, and even just like sending a few LinkedIn messages to people that maybe you haven't spoken to in a while that you've been connected to, and going for coffees with them. It might not lead exactly where you want it to go, but I find you never really know who's connected to somebody else, and then they might recommend you in the future, and then all of a sudden.
Definitely. And also you might think, oh, okay, nothing's going to come off it. It might be a slow burn. That's fine. Somebody that, I get it sometimes where I spoke to somebody a year ago and they come back and be like, oh, we're ready to work with you now. Like, so planting those seeds, I think, is really helpful. I think with the consistency point, the social media is definitely the same with that. There's no point being like, oh my God, I'm quiet, I need to post loads on social media, because people will notice and then you just look a bit desperate.
Yeah, I agree. Annika gave some good advice last week, actually. She said, just tell everyone about it when you launch, like family, friends,
Yes.
may not end up being your client, but you just do never know where your clients are going to come from. And there'll always be people that other people know that can make recommendations. So definitely, I thought that was great advice.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Quite a lot of the work I got in the early days was just from friends that knew me, where they know, or a friend of theirs, is looking for an accountant and they hear about it. Whereas, if I was working for a big firm, they probably wouldn't have referred them to me, but because they knew I was setting up on my own, they had a referral and, quite often they signed up, which was great.
I hope that answers your question. You put in the chat. Thank you. Thank you both. I love the positive take on the quiet times. You're welcome. I think the other mention, though, Deb, I know the quiet times are really difficult, but sometimes it's good to kind of take stock and try and figure out why you might be quiet. I had a little quiet period and realized that it's probably something to do with my services being a tad confusing, and people just having like a bit of too much choice of what I might be able to do for them. So it allowed me that time to really look at them in a lot more detail, and refine what I was doing. So yeah, this is definitely a good time to take stock.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're just working on client stuff all the time, you just don't have time to do all of that.
And I was going to say that earlier. You gave me that piece of advice when I first met you, and you said, are you going to take a day a week to work on a business? And I was like, yes, Natalie, I will. And I went and I worked all the hours that I possibly could under the sun because I was so paranoid about earning the money. And
then it goes quiet.
And then I just went completely, my head was all over the place. I didn't know if I was coming or going. So that's a great piece of advice, is to not work every single day. Our next question is from Kathleen. Hi, Natalie. What would you recommend putting in place financially before starting your business or going freelance?
So I think the best place to start is with a business plan. It doesn't need to be anything whizzy. You don't need an accountant to help you do that. There's the template that I actually used was from the Prince's Trust. I'll see if I can find it and put a link in the chat in a second. That was it just helps focus you, first of all. It helps you think about particularly the marketing stuff, who's your client, that kind of thing. And then you can put together kind of a rough budget. It's never going to be perfect and you're never going to stick to it 100%, but having that in place will really help. You can also look at the British Business Bank. They offer startup loans for businesses up to 3 years old. I've actually just been approved for one, and which is really exciting. So we're not quite through yet, so we still qualified. And you can get up to, I think it may only be for limited companies though, but you can get up to £25,000 per director. So you have to prepare a budget and a cash flow and everything, but they've got people that can support you with that, which is really helpful. And if you get approved for that, you get 12 months of free business mentoring as well, which is also really helpful. I'm not saying you necessarily need to have loads of cash in the bank to start, but if you need to invest in things, so perhaps your business means that you have to have an office or you need a car or something like that, thinking about those kind of things can really help as well. And just getting into those good habits that I talked about earlier, I think will help too.
Definitely. Thanks for your question, Kathleen. Hope that answers it. We now have a question from Seth. What budget should you have in the bank before going freelance? My partner was debating whether he could go freelance, but we have a lot of outgoings and are relying heavily on his income.
That is a difficult question. I think the sort of broad brush approach, if you went and Googled the answer to that question, would probably say 3 to 6 months of your outgoings kind of saved in the bank just in case. I personally think, I don't have 3 to 6 months of my outgoings saved. I don't think many people do, especially in this day and age. But I also think if you need the money, you'll find the money, if that makes sense. So there have been periods of time where I know I've had to pay my staff or I've had to pay a supplier and I'm like, or my VAT bill, and I'm like, don't quite have enough money. But that's when you go and you do loads of marketing, and you know, if you've got to find clients, you'll find clients. I think it's a bit like that feast and famine approach. It's the same with, you know, having client work, but also with money as well. Like I said, the startup loans are really good. They're really, I think the interest rate is only 6% on them, which is really good as well. That's quite low compared to a normal loan. You can also, if you've got a mortgage, sometimes they'll let you take a mortgage holiday if you're worried about that. Yeah, I think they were quite good during COVID, so they may have clamped down on it a bit more on that. Obviously, beg, borrow, and steal from anybody that you can is the other thing that you can think about doing. But if you put together a really good business plan, there's no reason why you couldn't get approved for a startup loan.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I was quite lucky, depends how you look at it. I did most of my mat leave in lockdown, so I wasn't going anywhere to spend any money, and so all of my maternity pay was just
Sorry, there's someone at my front door with this.
It's fine. Oh, life happens. Yeah, so that money was just all going into the bank account, and before that I was on furlough for a little period of time. So all of that money was just going in there, and with everything shut, I wasn't spending anything. But I definitely think, you know, there's an opportunity to be a bit more frugal if you're thinking of going freelance and just putting some money aside in a savings account. Now I suddenly feel all of this pressure to keep talking. Oh, there we go. Naturally.
Sorry, that was typical. Well, I had to answer it because the dog was going mad, so I couldn't hear anything.
Cool. I'm just gonna one last shout out for any final questions, if anyone has any. And while we're waiting to see if there are, oops, I have some contact details here. If you'd like to follow up with Natalie or I, my computer's frozen, sorry everyone. With any questions afterwards, or you'd like to say hi and connect on LinkedIn, then it would be lovely to see you. I'm just popping those in the chat now.
I'm just trying to find that business plan template that I mentioned as well, because that was really useful, but everything's gone slow at my end as well. Where is it?
Yeah, if there are no more questions, then we'll just get that business plan link, and we'll leave you all to your Friday afternoons. If you can't find it, Natalie,
I'll send it to you, and you can send it round afterwards if you like.
I can follow that up with a recording.
Yes, perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for your time. I'm running these webinars completely free. There are 4 more of them after today, every Friday, with lots of different topics, lots of amazing women giving us their time and just sharing their knowledge and their experiences. And I feel so lucky to be interviewing them all. The next one is Victoria Searle, who runs a business called Data Hawks. And she'll be talking to us about becoming unemployable, which everything that Vic talks about with regards to this topic, I just find really resonates. So if that sounds of interest, you can sign up to that one too, and I will put a link to that in the follow-up email from today. But thank you so much, Natalie, for imparting your finance wisdom on everyone today, and for your time. It's so generous, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to be here, and I hope you all took a lot away from it.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Saying thank you. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye.